Okay, we'd like to begin. We would like to welcome everybody to the Chicago Leadership Forum Breakfast Forum featuring Robert Barter. And before we begin, again, we'd like to thank Relevant Radio, who is our co-sponsor of these forums. And today, Carol Tomaselli's passing out information, so feel free to grab them, right, from Carol, and there's some listed on the desk. This morning's topic is Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, Enduring Insights about Human Nature and Relationships. Robert Barter, who is our speaker today, is a counselor and a teacher of literature at Northridge Prep in Niles. He holds a Bachelor of Arts degree in English and American Literature from Northwestern University. Bob worked in the nonprofit sector for 15 years at Misericordia Home, Lions Club International, and the Midtown Educational Foundation before coming to Northridge in 2011. Bob holds a Master of Arts degree in Marriage and Family Counseling. He is a licensed professional counselor and an associate marriage and family therapist, and with clinical experience working with children, adults, couples, and families. He works as a therapist for an organization in Park Ridge, Illinois. With his interest in literature and psychology, he has taught a course for Northridge Parent University program on Leo Tolstoy's Anna Karenina, as well as a course entitled Temperament Dynamics in Marriage and Family Life. Bob and his wife Julene have 4 young children. Please welcome Bob Barter.
Thank you, Mark, and thank you, everybody, for such a warm welcome. It's great to be here with you today. So yes, as you heard from Mark's remarks, there are a couple of subjects that have really attracted my interest for some time. And one of them is the marriage relationship, right? And I frequently find myself reading books and articles on this subject. And my wife and I joke sometimes that if a stranger were to walk into our house when we're not there and just kind of walk around and see all of these books on marriage counseling scattered about, he'd probably think, well, this couple's having some issues here, you know, I kind of feel sorry for us. Fortunately, that's not the case. I'm just really interested in this topic. And of course, it relates very closely with some of my professional work as a therapist. You know, each marriage is unique, right? And it's a wonderful thing to understand each couple's love story, right? What drew them toward one another, what challenges they've worked to overcome together, what they hope for in the future. And there are so many questions related to this subject that can prompt a variety of responses and perspectives as well, right? For example, what are the key ingredients to a successful marriage relationship? Or what contributes to the weakening of marital friendship, marital trust? How can couples experience a kind of renaissance in their relationship if there's been a period of growing apart? And these are all questions that I find myself rather fascinated to explore and to discuss with other people. The other big interest that I have emerged from a few classes that I took on Russian literature in college with just a wonderful professor named Gary Saul Morson, whose own insights on Russian literature I greatly admire and I try to carry forward in my own remarks. In a particular way, I developed a fondness for the fictional writings of Leo Tolstoy. And there are many other Russian authors, especially in the 19th century, whose writings are extremely powerful. Fyodor Dostoevsky is but one great example. But Tolstoy is the one who, more than anyone, has really captivated my own attention. You know, what's so interesting? What's so interesting about Leo Tolstoy? Well, first, there seems to be nothing that he cannot know about human nature, right? I mean, his insights about the moment-to-moment workings of the human mind are simply remarkable. And as a man, I can say that this is definitely true of his male characters. And it's true also of his female characters. My wife, my mother, my sisters have all read, for example, this novel, Anna Karenina, and they all remarked to me, how did Tolstoy, as a man, know exactly what I, as a woman, would be thinking right then and right there at that moment in the novel, right? Or in a moment that I would have similar to that in my own life, they would ask. Tolstoy even wrote a short story from the perspective of a horse, right? And you're sitting there reading and realizing, you know, if a horse really could think as we do, it would think, you know, it would be exactly what it would be thinking right there, you know, if it could think as we do. And so one of Tolstoy's real talents was to depict reality more faithfully and more honestly than just about anybody else. There's another story of his which he concludes with the following line that I appreciate. And I quote here, "The hero of my tale, whom I love with all the power of my soul, whom I have tried to portray in all his beauty, who has been, is, and will be beautiful, is truth." A truth with a capital T, right? And the great Russian authors really did pour themselves into discovering the truth about life's ultimate questions, which is why so many people have enjoyed reading these great works over so many generations. There's another quote that I've grown to appreciate about Tolstoy's realism as a writer, and it comes from a well-known critic of his day. And the quote goes, "If life itself could write, it would write like Tolstoy," right? Now, Tolstoy came to occupy a position toward the end of his life, especially a position in the world that simply had no parallel. He was the world's greatest writer. He championed the rights of the poor, and he was a renowned moral teacher as well, right? And so a word by Tolstoy on a moral subject would soon be quoted worldwide. Toward the end of his life, he was seen as the world's embodied conscience. Okay, people would make pilgrimages to his home, and this is when he was still living, right? Some would say that he was kind of like Shakespeare, Mother Teresa, and Martin Luther King Jr. all rolled into one in terms of the influence he had in his day. So what I'd like to do today in the half hour or so that we have together is to put forward a kind of combination of ideas. Some of the ideas will be from Tolstoy and from his novel Anna Karenina, which focuses primarily on the relationship of three couples. And this is a novel that's obviously regarded as one of the greatest novels of all time, if not the greatest. Some of the ideas I'd like to put forward will be more broadly speaking from this realm of married life. And you know, I mean, there are so many interesting ways to talk about marriage, right? We could do so theoretically, we could do so theologically, but I'm going to give a tip of the cap to Tolstoy today. Tolstoy was a big believer in the value of practical wisdom, right? And so I'd like to include today some very practical notions about married life, which I think could be applicable to virtually any important relationship in our lives. And so I was kind of thinking about how to structure these remarks. I was thinking, you know, if I had to extract two of the biggest points of counsel for married couples from the pages of this novel, Anna Karenina, what might they be, right? And the first one, right, there are many instances in this novel where Tolstoy seems to indicate the fundamental importance of one particular virtue within the marriage relationship. Think about what that might be, right, from your own experiences or perspectives, right? What would that one particular virtue be that has fundamental importance to the marriage relationship? Maybe some really good ones are coming to mind. Loyalty, kindness, generosity, self-sacrifice, okay, and these would all be very good answers. But the one that stands out to me as a reader is honesty, right? The importance of honesty in the marriage relationship. And so his first point of counsel might be promise your spouse that you're going to be honest, okay? And we see this play out, of course, in the themes and the characters and the storylines of this novel. There are plenty of negative examples in the novel to drive home this point. For example, there's this one memorable scene where Tolstoy allows us to eavesdrop, as it were, on the thoughts of one of his primary characters. And this is a character who's communicating with her husband, and Tolstoy, as a great realist writer, is kind of sharing with us what's on her mind, okay, as she's having this conversation. And we can pay attention to whether her inner thoughts match up with her words and her actions, okay, as we read. And what happens is we see her lying, right? We see her lying in little ways, here and there, small lies, right? Now, we typically think of lying as false speaking, right? We typically think of lying as false speaking. But Tolstoy would say that there's more to it than just that. There's also such a thing as false listening, okay? And this is a form of lying too. He wants to teach us that listening has moral value, right? Listening can be done in good faith and in bad faith, right? And sometimes human nature is such that we don't really want to admit our weaknesses, right? Or we don't want to talk about difficult things. And so what we can tend to do is deflect attention, as this character does in this scene, through poor listening, intentionally poor listening, okay? There's another form of dishonesty that Tolstoy points us to as well. And he wants us to understand that the most important action that we perform, because it's the one that we do most frequently in our lives, right? The most important action that we perform is, it kind of has to do with how we direct our attention. How we direct our attention. At every conscious moment, we look, we see, right? We see people and we see situations, right? And we make choices about what we're going to notice or what we're going to overlook. So in addition to false speaking and false listening, this form of dishonesty, Tolstoy might suggest, is false seeing, okay, which we can also be prone to. And this is also what we see in this scene of the novel, right? We see a character who chooses not to notice the pained and worried expression on the face of her husband, having to do with her own lack of fidelity, okay? These are negative examples having to do with the virtue of honesty. But the best and most positive examples of honesty are seen in one character in particular in this novel. His name is Levin, so I'll refer to him a couple of times here. I'm imagining that some of you have had experience with this novel, and perhaps others of you not yet. So I'm not going to get too much in the nitty-gritty of characters and plot and all this, in case some of you have not read the novel yet. Levin is a character who is so committed to honesty that he's frequently checking his own thought process, okay, to make sure that the words coming out of his mouth do not contradict things that he has said or done previously. And I think Tolstoy's point is that honesty is not always something that comes naturally to us, right? I came across a research study from a number of years ago, and the study kind of involved people being videotaped having 10-minute conversations. And then they would review the conversations with the people being videotaped afterwards. And the study found that on average, people told 2 to 3 lies within a 10-minute span of conversation. Okay, I mean, I don't know if that's true, but the study seemed to make a compelling case that it was. Okay, so sometimes honesty is a virtue that can kind of be taken for granted. But in reality, I think Tolstoy wants to suggest to us It's a virtue that absolutely has to be lived actively, right? And it can only be acquired through discipline and hard work. One of the challenges for this character named Levin is learning how to reveal, whenever it would be helpful to his wife, his interior world or his private thoughts. That's hard for him to do. His adjustment to married life, which we witness as readers, is a happy one, but it's not an easy one, okay? And Tolstoy gives us a great analogy in the story. When he was single, Levin looked upon marriage and family life as a person who would look out on the smooth course of a little boat on a lake, right? And it seems very peaceful to behold that image for him somehow. But actually being married, he realizes, is like being the person sitting inside that boat, right? It requires a lot of thinking about what direction you're heading in. It requires you to deal with the wind and the waves and the sore hands as you row, right? He realized, and I'm quoting from the novel here, that it was only to look at it that was easy, but that doing it, though very delightful, was very, very difficult, right? In other words, a great marriage, Tolstoy wants to suggest, is never about getting to a place where we can simply sit back and enjoy a loving relationship, right? It's never about that. A great marriage is always going to require a high degree of adjustment and hard work. And Levin, what we see him learning is that adjustments are more easily made if we're clued in to what's going on in our spouse's mind. Otherwise, we just somehow feel off balance, so to speak, right? If an interaction goes poorly for us, have you ever heard a person say, was it something I said, right? Was it something I said? And maybe it was, but more often than not, it's the things that go unsaid that can harm a relationship, especially in marriage, right? Because often there are really important things that need to be discussed that don't get discussed, right? And why is this? It's because to be fully sincere and fully honest, right, revealing our most private thoughts or feelings to another person is actually really difficult for most of us to do, okay? But when we're willing to share those private thoughts, whether they be likes or dislikes or hopes or worries, we ultimately become more united in decision-making, right? Because we have more helpful kind of information about one another's preferences right at hand for ourselves. And this, of course, is one of the big secrets to building compatibility in the marriage relationship. All right, getting practical here. I'm going to just suggest 3 practices that encourage marital honesty. And perhaps some of you do these already. Perhaps there's something in here that you like what you hear and you want to try out, okay? There's this one well-known marriage counselor. His name is Willard Harley. He's written several books as a marriage counselor. And he swears by something he calls the policy of joint agreement in married life. And it's very simply stated, but he thinks it's absolutely critical for the success of a marriage for it to be practiced well. And it goes like this: never do anything without an enthusiastic agreement between you and your spouse, right? Never do anything without an enthusiastic agreement between you and your spouse. And I think the emphasis in this one line, this policy, is on the word enthusiastic, okay? Because if there's not enthusiasm about the decision, then that's serving as a prompt for more honest conversation to take place, which can eventually lead to more wholehearted agreement. So when spouses are talking with one another, he might say, it's appropriate sometimes to check in and say, are you enthusiastic about my idea, right? And if the answer is no, then maybe that needs to be reworked a little bit. Okay, the second one out of the three, just as some companies or businesses sometimes engage in what's called a continue, stop, start survey from time to time, couples can do something similar conversationally every once in a while. And so the continue, stop, start survey is 3 questions, okay? And I'm applying these now to married life. Number 1, what is something good that I'm doing that you'd like me to continue? Okay, you're going to get some good knowledge, some good information from that question. The second question, what is one thing that it would be a great relief for you for me to stop doing? Okay, what is one thing that it would be a great relief to you for me to stop doing? Somebody forwarded me a list of some of the most annoying habits that people can have, and people put on this list, right? And I was taking a look through it, and I was just struck. Several of them had to do with just things that occur in the kitchen, right? Noises while eating was, I think, number 1 on the list. And another one was just like not putting dishes where they belong after eating, right? And there are several other interesting ones. But a lot of times the answer to that question has to do with maybe some little annoying habit that we have that is rubbing our spouse the wrong way. And only this question kind of gives an outlet to be able to express that and gives us a prompt to maybe make an adjustment, right? And then the third question, the start part of it, is there anything you'd like to see us start doing that would be really great for our relationship or for our family? These are great conversations to have between a husband and a wife. And I think, when I'm talking with young people at the school that I work at, sometimes the conversation as we're going through this novel together kind of drifts toward, well, what are the things that you want to be keeping top of mind in terms of finding somebody who's going to be really great for you in marriage someday, right? And I think one of the things that I would say is watch how they treat their family members, right? Watch how they treat their family members. Because it's a pretty good indicator of how you're going to be treated someday, okay? The other one is get a real sense of the other person's commitment to self-improvement. To commit to self-improvement, even to be aware of the need for self-improvement, requires a great deal of honesty, does it not? Right? But this has to do with these little habits, kind of going back to what would be a great relief to you for me to stop doing. It can go back to those little habits that maybe we need to improve upon. And more importantly, it can apply to just bigger character issues that we all need to be focused on, okay? So anyway, the continue, stop, start survey is another practical consideration here coming out of this conversation about honesty. And the third one is periodically having frank conversations about how well we're meeting one another's emotional needs in marriage. Most of us have a very reliable internal scorekeeper about how well our spouse is meeting our own emotional needs, right? But we can certainly have our blind spots about how well we are meeting our spouse's emotional needs. In my own experience of working with couples, a very common emotional need for women would be the need for affection, right? For a husband to express through his words and through small gestures that I care so much about you, you are so important to me, right? And he can do that in 100 different ways. A common emotional need for many men that I would work with is admiration, or kind of words of affirmation, right? Many women and many men themselves don't realize what a huge motivator it is for a man to have this need met very well. So when it comes to this aspect of emotional needs, there can be really good give and take conversation about it in married life. Maybe a man says to his wife, honey, on a scale of 1 to 10, how well am I being affectionate with you, right? I mean, she could name any number. What if she says, I'd say about a 6 out of 10, okay? There are a couple of really key follow-up questions that can be asked there, right? Well, first of all, you want to know what you're doing well. So one of the follow-up questions could be, what is something that I'm currently doing that keeps me from slipping a little bit lower on that scale, from going 6 to 5, say, right? I think you'll get some really good information, okay? And you also want to know where you could improve. What's one thing over the next week or so that I could do to bump it up a point on the scale, right? To take that 6 to a 7. And again, really good information will result, I think. These are conversations which assume an underlying charity, an underlying sensitivity, right? These are honest conversations, and they build up that most important quality in marriage, which is trust, mutual trust. And a good definition of trust, I think, comes from John Gottman, who I'll refer to in a few minutes too. He defines trust as the healthy state that exists when husband and wife are both willing to change their own behavior to benefit the other. I think it's a really good definition, okay? A healthy state that exists when a husband and wife are both willing to change their own behavior to benefit the other. Okay, so the first point of counsel from the pages of this novel has to do with honesty. Let me get to the second point of counsel. I'm going to work my way toward it a little bit here. So as a writer, one of Tolstoy's best gifts is his ability to make goodness genuinely attractive, right? He might say that on some level, evil is always going to be intrinsically interesting to us, right? There's a reason why so many television shows, for example, have dark themes and dark plots and get very, very high ratings, okay? And there's a reason why when I turned on the evening news, I don't know, a week or two ago, and was kind of just paying attention to the order of the broadcast in terms of stories, that it went something like this. First, murder, then a story about a fire, and then fraud, and then robbery, and then controversy XYZ, and then I think you got the weather report after that, right? Followed by the sports. And maybe at the very end, when 90% of viewers have tuned out, you get some feel-good story or image that lasts about 15 seconds, okay? So evil is what gets ratings, so to speak, Tolstoy would say. Compared with evil, it is much harder to make goodness interesting and attractive. Tolstoy is the best writer ever, hands down, when it comes to having the capacity to make goodness appealing. And he did this with ease. He did this with great ease. Whole sections of his novels or stories can thus be very formative for us as readers, because they infect us with an appreciation for those moments for which we probably should be more grateful, right? Those good moments. And this is especially true when it comes to happy moments in family life. Tolstoy might say that we come into contact with the best kind of wisdom, right, from people who have had a great experience of family life growing up, much more so, he would say, than from those with the highest degrees or the most impressive titles. And speaking of these happiest moments, Tolstoy had an idea about happiest moments. You see, if we were asked to come up with a short list of the happiest moments of our lives, our memories would tend to create order in such a way that we would first consider the most prominent events that were very noticeable, that had obvious significance to us, right? Our wedding day, the birth of a child, a graduation experience, etc., right? But these are not the happiest moments of our lives, Tolstoy would say. The happiest moments of our lives do not come to us with advance notice. They come to us in the rhythms of everyday life, and they occur in ordinary and simple circumstances. The happiest moments of our lives, he would say, are those moments in which we are so immersed in the present moment that we would never even think to stop and weigh the moment's significance or value. Therefore, our memory would never call them to mind later on, okay? And he would say that it is the accumulation of these moments that make for a happy life. One way to read Anna Karenina is to look out for these happy moments, because they can be tucked within the most ordinary of moments in this novel, and they can be sometimes very easy to miss. Another way to read this novel is to look out for its hero in a Tolstoyan sense. Because we often associate heroism with people who are noticeable or actions that are dramatic. But for Tolstoy, real heroism does not look like heroism in the usual or the conventional sense. You see, for Tolstoy, heroism is focused on small, ordinary, good deeds and thoughtfulness, on working quietly in the background, on doing the right thing without recognition. And he would have said that very few people in this world possess the courage to do small things the right way and to serve other people without any recognition, right? I think he would have said, perhaps for rhetorical effect, that you never really know who the truly great and heroic people are in this life. But you'll know those who are not. Those who are not are the people that everybody says are great. Perhaps they've been a little bit too fond of being noticed, he would say, okay? So this novel is similar to other works of his, where he gives us a hero who's very easy to miss, okay? Because he or she is inconspicuous, okay? And in case you have not read the novel and would like to, I'm not going to tell you who the Tolstoyan hero is in Anna Karenina, but I think you'll enjoy trying to discern who that character is. I once heard it expressed that there are 3 levels of doing good for other people. The first level is that you know you're doing good for them, and they know you're doing good for them. A higher level of doing good is when you know you're doing good for them, and they do not know that you're doing good for them. But the highest level of doing good for others is when neither you nor they know that you are doing good for them, right? It makes us wonder, well, how is that even possible, right? That we wouldn't know the good that we are doing for others. And Tolstoy would say that it's when it is so much a habit for us that we are not even conscious of it, okay? And this is the kind of heroic love that often exists in family life, right? When we give so much, right? We give so much and we do it without any hope for something in return. So here I am talking about goodness and happiness and self-giving, right? All in the context of these common moments from everyday life. And so let me get to that second point of counsel or encouragement from Tolstoy in the pages of this novel to couples. It's to live our ordinary moments very well, and to live our ordinary moments with wisdom, right? It's to pour our heart into our prosaic interactions. And what's an application to married life? I referred to this well-known researcher on marriage named John Gottman a few moments ago, and he studied carefully what he calls the masters and the disasters of married life. And really, this is what the masters do. They make it a habit to put their heart into moments that others would consider maybe too mundane, right? He talks about, for example, the magic 5 hours that the masters prioritize each week. Okay, so for example, before parting ways each day, a couple makes it a point to learn one thing that's going to be happening in their spouse's day, that day, okay? It's easy, right, to rush out of the house without having just a brief conversation. Hey, tell me one thing that's going on in your day today. But I think that's a great practice. The masters try to have a stress-reducing conversation at the end of the day, right? Sometimes it's as little as 5 or 10 minutes, sometimes longer, but really recapping high points and low points from one another's day. They recognize habitually the universal need, arguably the greatest human need, for appreciation, right? And they find at least one specific way to express their sincere appreciation for one another each day, right? And lastly, he says they try hard. Sometimes it's not always easy to pull off, but they try hard to schedule a weekly date, okay, if at all possible. A relaxing, low-pressure way to stay close. And if you add up the time spent on these actions every week, you come to about 5 hours, okay, of accumulated time over the course of a whole week. Hence the magic 5, he says, right? And these are the couples who will likely experience many of life's happiest moments in the long run, whose goodness will be attractive to anyone who befriends them, and who give us a wonderful example of the power of self-giving love. Speaking of 5 hours, you can tell that I'm pretty passionate about these topics, right? Tolstoy and married life. And I could go on for about 5 hours here, I think. But I know that we have to get to work this morning. So I just want to conclude by saying best wishes if you decide to delve into Tolstoyan fiction, Anna Karenina, or any of Tolstoy's other wonderful works. And I thank you for the opportunity to be with you this morning. So thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Yes. Sure. Yeah.
I'm struck by something that you didn't say that much about. I haven't read Anna Karenina, but I read War and Peace. I read much of the rest of his shorter works. And one of the key things is the difference. Men and women are extremely different from each other. And what men and women find appealing in each other is quite different, right? We think of Natasha Rostov, very, very feminine, right? What she's attracted to, and Andrei Bolkonsky, is he doesn't give much to her. He has a mission in life that drives him, and she wants to be part of that, okay? And we all here, I don't do marriage counseling, you do, but we've all seen people we know whose marriages have disintegrated. And my layman's view is it's typically because the women fail to be feminine and appealing to their husbands. But most of the time, it's that the men fail to have the masculine strength that women find appealing, okay? And especially in a situation now we have women in the workplace and they're attracted to male strength. If their husbands aren't strong and people of character and people who don't necessarily always do everything by consensus but maintain some leadership, that's fatal to a marriage. So do you agree with that? Do you agree that's what Tolstoy says, and is that what you have seen in your counseling practice?
Great question. As a therapist, I'm kind of trained to respond to questions with questions of my own, right? But I will try to engage that very interesting question that you asked. I think Tolstoy also believes, and this is particularly true in War and Peace, which you're referencing, that we run risks when we try to pin down what he might call single causation, right? So to kind of point toward one cause that is at play in terms of being responsible for the disintegration of marriage relationships or historical realities, I think. So I'm thinking through how he would navigate that question, and I'm thinking about the couples that I've worked with in therapy, and what I find is that there are myriad causes that can go into a weakening of marital trust over the long haul. And so sometimes it can take some time to have those causes be revealed, but once they are, I think that's when some really good work can be done, okay, in the therapy room, if there's a real commitment to that honesty and desire for self-improvement, if there's a real desire to save a marriage, right? But there are a lot of things that need to be discussed in addition to what you're bringing up here, right? And some of the things that need to be discussed go way back to what husband and wife experienced in terms of understanding how love works in their own upbringing, right? In addition to what needs to be focused on with the current state of their relationship. So thank you for the question. I'm a reflective person. I will take that question with me this morning and think about it some more because I think it's a really fascinating one. Yeah. So, hi, Dan.
Three questions, two easy, one hard. Okay. First question, was this recorded? Because I'd like to memorize this thing. Was this recorded?
Thanks.
Second question is, what translation of Tolstoy do you recommend for an English-speaking person? For us, what
Yeah.
translation do you like best?
So I rely on the professor that I had in college who speaks Russian and reads Russian. I do not. I'm not a Russian speaker. He swore by the Constance Garnett translations. So if, for example, you want to read Anna Karenina, look out for Constance Garnett as the translator. She has done a marvelous job, according to my professor, and certainly as a reader of fiction myself, I find it to be a wonderful work that becomes a very easy read for me, even though it by nature encourages a lot of deep thought, right?
And that translation was made in the early 1900s, right?
I believe it was, yeah. Because there are some more recent translations that I know I've read my professor finding fault with, right? But that one is older and appreciated by him, so.
Okay. Now, here's a hard question. It's kind of a little bit of a follow-up with Mike's question. One of the things that I think I experienced more than anything else in talking to my friends whose marriages are in trouble is that in a society where everything is disintegrating, where there's no sense of shared values, where there's confusion and there's active reinforcement of the cult of selfishness by the society itself, I run into a lot of marriages where one of the members is a serious Christian, okay, and the other is not, has oftentimes absolutely no interest and even kind of a mild antipathy to anything like Christianity that talks about carrying the cross or going against what you want to do. Okay. They got married in the first place basically because she was a girl and he was a guy. There was an attraction there, and that's why they got married. Okay. But then all of a sudden, there's nothing else there. But they're stuck. I mean, they're in this marriage. They've got to make it go. And I'm thinking, for example, right now of two couples I know where one of the parties just would like to see the family go to Mass on Sunday. And the other party has absolutely no interest, despite requests and so forth, talking about it from the standpoint of the good of the children. They just won't go. That doesn't mean anything. Now, that particular couple cannot get enthusiastic agreement on something that is very, very basic, okay, to the life of any Christian. What do you do in a situation like that? How in the world? This is where I think there's sometimes a leadership has to be required, whether or not there's enthusiastic agreement, You know, how do you deal with that? What do you do when you're married to someone who has no appreciation whatsoever for what's central to your thought process, your soul, your life?
Well, do we have another hour for? No, I'm just joking. Yeah. Wow, Dan. There's going to be real suffering there. There's going to be real loneliness there, because I'm sure for the one who's practicing the faith, it is what he or she treasures the most, and not to be able to share that with his or her spouse must be a cause for great anguish, right? So I don't have an easy answer to that question. I think there's a lot of prayer and sacrifice that hopefully can be efficacious on the part of people who love this couple and want to see them grow in unity. I think your question speaks to some really important work that needs to be done when it comes to premarital counseling and preparation for marriage, right? I think one of the things that I notice is that a lot of times a young couple will set the wedding date, right? And as soon as they do, real marriage preparation kind of flies out the window, because there's so much work that needs to be done on arranging for the details of the actual wedding ceremony itself, and the reception and the honeymoon, etc. So I think some cutting edge work needs to be done in terms of helping young couples to identify those areas that need to be addressed, okay, so that they understand the longer term ramifications of what it means to not have unity in terms of church attendance on Sundays, for example, what that means in the eyes of their children, right? The kind of tension that can create later on. And I think this also speaks to a very Tolstoyan idea that that is present in Anna Karenina. What is love is a question that he answers in this novel, right? And our culture has inherited very silly notions about the nature of love and what it means. And we sometimes fall trapped to identifying love as just a feeling, okay? A very intense feeling, okay? But Tolstoy wants to point out to us that love is much more having to do with the will, okay? And kind of overcoming feelings which can float this way or that way in order to practice real virtue. Even in marriage especially, I think this gets to both of your points, the importance of self-sacrifice, okay? And doing things that sometimes we don't always feel like doing for the sake of the relationship, for the sake of our children, for the sake of the family. So anyway, that's my best attempt, Dan. And once again, I'm motivated to ponder that question, which is, I know, a really important one. So thank you. And one more thing before I get to Doug. The translation on War and Peace, which is a phenomenal work by Tolstoy. There's another name that I want to give to you. Constance Garnett for Anna Karenina, Anne Dunnigan for War and Peace as a translator. Okay, so thanks, Doug.
So I was trying to think how Gottman would answer.
Great, yeah.
Because he talks about one of the important things in a happy marriage is the ability to accept influence from your spouse, to allow your spouse to influence you. In a case like this, the one spouse is not allowing the other spouse to influence him or her thought and tendencies. So that's a marriage that's heading for some ground. There's a way to structure that conversation. And in fact, a little commercial plug, tomorrow at 10:30, I'm going to be on Kevin Thornton's show. And I'm going to talk about how to structure conflict conversations in a positive way. So tune in at 10:30 if you want my answer to this.
Stay tuned.
Just keep the radio on all morning.
And there you go. And one of the things, just to piggyback on Doug's insight there, Gottman talks about is that 80% of the time, it's the woman who initiates the conversation about some conflict area, right? So he talks about how what's critical for women is to really learn how to, what he calls, use a softened startup, right? How to introduce the conversation gently. Great. Yeah. Because if it's not softened, then the man tends to retreat or become defensive, and the conversation goes south. And the key for the man is to, as you say, accept the influence, right? Because if they don't do that, the conversation is not going to turn out well. So yeah.
I just wanted to comment on the question, and I have not read the book, and so really fearful. You know, and that's not like honest, because if he's not opening to what's logical, he's not opening his mind to that. And then on the female side, you know, when the honesty is what our real role is and what our real gifts are and what we need to identify, you know, rather than trying to identify with what the culture is trying to encourage us to do, like be that breadwinner, do the same thing the men. I mean, that's a lie. That's not being honest with who God created us to be. So each of us, if we reflect on that honesty, like this character is describing, I think that there would be some more.
Yeah, thank you so much for that comment. I think it's really insightful, and yeah, I think honesty is a topic that I wanted to introduce because there are so many ways to consider it. And when you do get a chance to look through the novel and watch the characters from the perspective of Tolstoy as a realist author who's gonna give you exactly what they're thinking, right? And these are fictional characters, but they're possible people, right? Because he's doing it so realistically. And the experience of this novel is that it's true to life. And so I think we do stand a lot to learn. We stand to learn a lot about what these characters are thinking and how it relates to the virtue of honesty. So thanks for your comment. So great. All right. Great to be with you this morning. Thank you very much, and hope you have a great day. All right. So thanks.